All right, welcome to another edition of the Supply Chaney podcast. I am your host, Nathan Chaney, and we're here with Misbah from Rapyuta Robotics, who is the National Partnerships Manager for Rapyuta. And we're hanging out here in Irving, Texas, and I'm going to talk a little bit about robotics, a little bit about what partnerships mean in the tech space. And I know that you hit up quite a few conferences and trade shows, so I'd be curious to pick your brain on that. So welcome to the podcast, and say a few more words about yourself and Rapyuta.
Sure, and thank you for having us. It's a pleasure to be here. A little bit about me. I've been with Rapyuta for about a year now, and I started more in the networking space, and then that led me into the robotics world. So now I'm just here learning more about the different technologies in the warehouse space as well. As far as Rapyuta goes, we've been here since January of 2023. So we're coming up to our 2 years and going pretty headstrong with our Pick Assist AMR, which is #1 in Japan. So really proud about that. We're trying to replicate efforts here into the United States as well. Along with that, we have our autonomous forklift and ASR solution too.
All right. Let's dig a little bit more into your personal story and kind of how you found your way into, warehouse robotics.
Sure. Actually, it's a pretty funny story. I started off my career, I went to school actually for kinesiology. The goal was to become a physician's assistant, and my whole life I said, you know what, medical is the route for me. 6 months before graduation, I said, maybe this isn't the route that I want to take, and decided to pivot. And I decided to kind of see what other alternatives are there. I didn't know what to get into. I was so nervous. I was so scared. I mean, my whole life has been about medicine, and then here I am not knowing what I wanted to do anymore. So it was terrifying for sure. And I started looking around to see maybe if business side is what I maybe relate to. There was a network company that related or that worked with AT&T, wireless technologies as well. And that's when I was like, okay, let me see if this is something that works out for me. So I started with them as a project coordinator. Worked my way up as a project manager. Liked it. I liked the PM space. Pivoted a little bit. And then I came back to the network world when private LTE was getting hot, and then got a chance to learn more about that, different frequencies, different, I guess, more of network other than Wi-Fi. And they said, hey, okay, what is the requirement that's needed for a better coverage, right? So then I was looking at different industries, different verticals, whether that would be warehousing, mining, manufacturing, and went more of a micro level and noticed that in these warehouse space, you have robots that run around. So anything initially that requires or that moves around needs something better than your traditional Wi-Fi. And if you have Wi-Fi, you'll need more APs to cover those gaps, so those robots are able to seamlessly move around. So then I was like, oh, this is a perfect use case. And that got me into robotics. And the more I researched on it, the more I was like, I really like robots. And that's how I found my way into the robotics space, found Rapyuta, and been with them for a year now. And it's been a lot of fun.
So you've kind of been in the tech space and whatnot. I know that in our earlier conversations, you shared that you went down the road of like paramedic, EMT kind of stuff, right? What was your experience like for that?
Yeah, so my goal was that if I'm going into PA school, you need hours. So in order to do that, I said, hey, you know what, let me go into the EMT route. Did that for a little bit. And, it's one thing you read about it in books and then you experience it in real life and you're like, oh, man. And I guess it's good that they require those hours to be done. And so, yes, I did that for a little bit. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed helping people. But ultimately, I realized that maybe this wasn't the place. A lot of it I would kind of take back home to the lives that were lost, unfortunately. It hit hard. And so I said, you know what, in the long run, I don't think that I see myself doing this. And that was also one of the reasons I pivoted away from medicine.
So we've kind of fast forward to your role now looking after partnerships. What does that mean?
Partnerships for me means working alongside with not just automation technology, but also software that's being implemented into these warehouses. So you have your WMS companies as well. So just partnering with them to make sure that there's a seamless transition when it comes to adding robots for those end customers. So when we're going into warehouse space, there's some companies that still don't have a WMS, right? That means, hey, we can take those guys to market with us. Like, hey, we have partnered with these WMS companies. We've already integrated with them. This has already been set up. So that way it's ready for you to deploy, basically, right? And then if you want to, or when you're ready to deploy those robots, it's also an easier.
Just much harder. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I've seen that use case where a company wants to go into automation and get robots and inventory drones and do all the cool things that we see all at the shows. but they actually don't have a robust data system and inventory system in the background. So it's like, where's that? How are you going to feed the information these robots and drones and stuff need to know where they need to go? And then once they do their thing, where are they feeding back into to say this task was done and all this sort of stuff? So you've got to have a good foundation of data and systems in place before you can really take that next step into automation and robots, right?
Exactly. And not just also that, to touch more onto it, right? So some warehouses do require certain customization to these robots, right? So that's where our system integrators also play a big role. We've seen so many unique use cases, especially in the apparel space, right? Where there's some that say, hey, we like your robot. Could we have a roller top? Could we like your robot? Could we add this instead, right? So just trying to understand where they're going and then taking that back to our team. I'm like, hey, can we do something like this? And then involving system integrators where we need to is also a big part of partnerships for Rapyuta too.
Gotcha. So your role is basically to kind of like manage all these sort of different ways that you can partner with a lot of different other stakeholders to help them, they help you, and obviously kind of just make this mutual partnership work for everyone.
Exactly. And that is very important. It's more, my goal is to make sure that I'm also helping on their end too, and seeing wherever I can provide more information to get to them, to get to their end goal. So now it's not just, hey, how are you helping me, but also how am I helping you, right? So I want to make sure that it's a two-way street.
And so part of this partnership role requires you to travel and attend a lot of trade shows and conferences. Can you kind of tell what a day in the life of you, I guess, in traveling around and seeing and meeting people and making your relationships and fostering the ones you already have? What does that look like?
Yeah, so it's a lot easier. I know it seems scary to just go up to people and introduce yourself and then talk to them. It's easier when you also come off as, hey, I'm just trying to learn, I'm trying to understand better. And you'd be surprised how many people are open to sharing that knowledge, right? And understanding, hey, what are you seeing? What are the gaps? So when I go to these trade shows, I like to speak with different groups of people, some that are just starting out into their automation journey, some that, just haven't even thought about automation yet. They're still running on papers. And then I've got some that have fully automated. And I'd like to understand different areas that, hey, those that have fully automated, what are your gaps? Do you see gaps? If you like automation, why is that? If you don't like it, why is that? And you get a lot of insight into their operation and understanding, hey, this is what they're looking at and what they're doing next to fill those gaps versus looking at somebody that's just starting into automation, why they're starting into it, why just now, what are their gaps there, or is there any hesitation, right? Because at these trade shows, almost everyone says, hey, yeah, we need to automate. That is the next thing that is going to have to happen.
Right.
So then my concern goes, okay, great. Then what's the hiccup, right? So for those that are ready to automate, what's your hiccup? So I like to understand that piece. And so just hearing those thoughts, a lot of people at these trade shows have been saying that, yes, we need to automate. That is going to happen in the next, definitely, 6-7 years. It's going to be $1 billion industry, which that we've heard over and over again. Other than that, we keep hearing about these labor shortages too. This last conference I was at AMR, they said that, a lot of people fear that with robots, they're going to take over human jobs, right? But one of the speakers said, hey, but let's say if we hire a bunch of people, 50% of them don't even show up to their first day. And so that gap is never really an issue that robots are going to take over jobs. And that's another big important factor for Rapyuta too. Our robots are designed to work alongside with humans, right? So we want to make sure that we've even had use cases, right? Where people, when these robots were deployed, the warehouse associates who were doing all the picks, they said, hey, they felt better about their job, right? That they were learning more, that they got a chance to learn and work on technology like this, right? So that's also an important aspect. So for me, in a regular conference day, it would be just attending these sessions, understanding what people are seeing, understanding, just not just automation purpose, but also in AI, what's coming up, what's new, right? Last conference, somebody from one of the big 3PLs also spoke about how they're now building their own in-house AI to optimize their day-to-day function. And just the way they spoke about it, which is going to be launched in a couple of months, it's really interesting to learn more and see how, hey, these are how the big players are going into this space, because these are the gaps that they saw. So it's good to learn and understand that.
So one question that I ask all of my guests is to put themselves back like in their school days and imagine those students that are studying business and maybe studying logistics and supply chain right now. Is there any words of advice that you would give to them with regards to classes to focus on, or maybe interpersonal type of development type things to prepare them to do maybe something like what you do today?
Yeah, I would say that one advice that I never got, I wish that, I got earlier, is a lot of these trade shows are free to attend. If you find a local one, they're definitely free to attend. There's chapters as well that you can get connected with. These early connections also help because they can help you guide into, hey, what are you looking to do? Maybe you should talk to this person, right? So for me, a lot of that I learned in recent years talking to leadership now, asking them for their advice. And like, oh, you know what? Who'd be a best person? This. And if I had known that, I would have started that about 10 years ago rather than just now.
Right.
But hey, never now than, what am I trying to say?
Better
late than never. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say is attend these trade shows.
Good idea.
Supply Chaney has a great online
Warehousing After Dark?
Yes, Warehousing After Dark. And I think that's also a great thing that you're doing to get the community to come together. That way they know, hey, this is around, who's in the space, who's in the local area too. So not just nationally. You can start off small and then build your way up and speak to these folks that are already in this industry and making headway. That's definitely one of the recommendations. As far as personal learnings go, something that I learned on my own was just trying to understand how to network better, which books to read. There's a book that I always recommend to everybody that's graduating. It's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Yeah, it's a great book. And I think if you apply it, it could do wonders.
Right. I think that's a good call out about attending shows that you can as a student. One, it gets you out of the books and like theory that you might be studying in class and gives you like real context of what you're reading about or taking a test on next week. One, typically all these things are free for students. So there's that. And then it kind of just seems like we all naturally gravitate in the industry to attending some kind of conferences in the future, whether we're behind the booth or in front of the booth or we're the ones speaking or what every kind of major player in an industry goes to conferences. It's how you develop. It's how you develop your business and your intelligence. And so if you can get exposed to that earlier on in your career, maybe while you're still in school, then when you're in a job function that requires you to go do that, you've already been there and done that, right? It's not this big scary concept because you were already there. And I got this chance whenever I was in school to go to my first CSCMP Edge conference. And I was there as a student assistant, right? I was there helping point people to the right meeting room or whatever. And that experience allowed me later on in life, whenever I started going to conferences, to feel really comfortable in that setting because I had already kind of been there and it wasn't a first time experience, So good call out. That's great suggestion. Another sort of round of kind of questions that I like to ask folks is can you share an example of a time when you kind of fell down on your face, maybe not literally, but where things have just really went wrong, right? And maybe like what you learned from that experience, just to help folks that maybe just recently let something fall through the cracks and they're just thinking, man, I'm not going to recover from this. Do you have one of those kind of stories?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's different phases of my life that that has happened. One of them definitely being when 6 months before graduation, right? That's where I truly felt like I was like, oh, what do I do? My whole life's been about this. Now I'm going to make a career change 6 months out of graduation. I can't even, am I supposed to go back to school? Am I supposed to do a business degree? Do I even want to do that?
Right.
I want to try finance, accounting, just trying to, it was a lot because there's a pressure of you graduate, you find a job, you get started, right? And I'm like, okay, but I'm supposed to do that when I don't even know what I want to do. So I think that's one of the earliest moments where I felt like, I truly fell in my face and didn't know what I wanted to do. And the way I came out of that was I learned about different industries. I know it was a little bit later. Some people learn this earlier in their college career. For me, learned it 6 months before graduation. Kind of took a break and seeing how, hey, this is what accounting entails. This is business. This is this. And then from there, took a moment and said, okay, maybe I want to try the business. Maybe I want to try project management. I like this. Maybe I should go for my PMP license and, try that. So it was lucky for me it worked out, but that's how I navigated it. Just kind of took a step back, looked at every option that I maybe wanted to try out, and then took a step approach from there that, hey, if this is what I want to try, where do I get started? How do I get started? And that's the way I went forward. for that. Other than that, another moment I would say is just more on the professional side too. When you are looking into, so when I was moving from the PM space into the more partnerships and working in kind of that sales role as well. Same thing. I like to talk to folks only because I like to understand and learn more and see where they're coming from, where their pain points are. And so my previous boss said, you know what, you should try sales. And I said, oh, okay, sure. And that's when I started to gear more towards understanding more of what comes in, right? Because PM space was more of, okay, we got the project. This is what we're working on. This is how we're going to deploy it.
Yeah.
Now this was more of an earlier on strategy on how business comes in, how you navigate through that, and how you do the customer success piece, kind of looking at a whole bigger picture. And I think it gave me a really good insight as to understanding that beginning aspect that I was missing. So it kind of chained everything together for me. It was hard at first because I didn't know anything about sales.
Yeah.
I didn't know nothing. Like there's nothing that I just kind of learned from picking up from people that I had met, understanding their strategies, understanding how they strategize certain things, how they plan for these things. And again, I feel like that was a little bit harder. But the way I navigated through that was I just took more time on asking my peers these questions, asking my senior leaders these questions. And if you go to your leadership with these questions, they're never going to turn you down. I've been very lucky with that. They've been very helpful. And so I think they helped me navigate through that piece better. One thing that is the greatest source is YouTube. You can YouTube anything, and they've gotten some great channels there. Same thing about networking. I didn't know anything about it. So went on YouTube, learned a lot about it, learned how the network piece works, how IT works, and everything in the background works. So I think that helped a lot as well.
A question for you.
Sure.
It's probably a little bit of a stretch, but there's got to be some lessons and things that you studied in school that you learned in the medical field and kinesiology field that applies in the world of business somewhere in there. Is there something that you've kind of noticed that maybe something you learned? Obviously, it's not going to be in the details of it, but right in the big picture, that something in the medical sort of profession has like a business sort of a tie-in. Do you have anything like that?
I think because of the core is also similar. So when you're working with robots, you also get a chance to work really closely with the engineering team. For me, it's also important to understand how robots work, how things function.
Right.
And I've noticed a lot of things come back to some level of, hey, this is how physics and math and all of those basic
systems, right? Systems. Like you got body systems, right? And you understand how they work, and if you understand how they work, you can diagnose where something might be wrong. A robot maybe is not so different than a human in that regard.
I'll say at this. Yeah. So I think, going from that, I always make a joke at our last conference. We all got shirts that said a robot doctor. And I was like, look at that. Perfect.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
So, I think in that stance, it is similar. You're looking at two different things, but again, how robot functions, how their system operates, right? What I like to call our software is the brains behind the operation, right? Which is truly the case for medical too, right? Your brain that functions in the way. So it's kind of sad that I'm comparing integration to the way we work, but sure.
Right. A little bit there. So you talked a little bit about those opportunities. I want to kind of go back to when 6 months before graduation, you're like, oh, pump the brakes. What am I really doing here? There's a good percentage of college graduates out there that pick a degree program that turns out to not be their lifelong love of thing what they want to do for the rest of their life. Is there anything that if you could have gone back in time 3 or 4 years before that day, is there something that you think you could have done differently to have kind of had that light bulb moment 4 years earlier? And if you've got a good answer to that, there's a whole lot of people are going to save a bunch of tuition money right now. So any thoughts?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing for me, because I was more focused on medicine, I didn't really look anywhere else. What I wish I would have done is maybe chose a different minor. If I could have just picked a different understanding, right? So I understood what my major was, which was kinesiology, right? But then maybe if I had chosen a minor that I wanted to maybe pursue business, right? Or something in that aspect, then I think would have helped me gain that understanding better that yes, there's this, but then, hey, there's also this. And while doing my minor, maybe I would have been like, wait, you know what? I gravitate more towards this than this. And I think that would have helped me make that decision early on rather than later. Not just that, what I would also recommend is even though you feel so focused and gravitating towards one place, which is good. And if that is for you, fantastic. But even if there's a part of you that's like, hey, maybe this isn't for me, ask yourself why. And maybe talk to there's advisors as well, and see what other maybe electives that you can take that can help you through that. That's more on school. Other than that, there's programs as well. So even when I was involved with my university, the programs I was involved with were all medical programs. But if I had taken that step back and got myself involved in other programs too, talk to other colleges, whether that would be College of Business, Architect, Engineering, whatever it may be, right?
Yeah.
I feel like I would have gotten a better feel for what else is out there. So that's what I would recommend if you feel even a slight bit of hiccup on what you're doing.
Right. But until that point, you're like in your honeymoon period. Like this is like what you decide you want to do for your rest. So I could see that it's hard to be like, oh, there's just 1% little quiet voice somewhere. And maybe that voice doesn't show up at all, right? Until the party is about to start. And maybe, I think I remember in high school days, there were these like career sort of tests, surveys that you could do where it was like 100 questions or something like that. And by answering these questions, it kind of gave you some indication of what sort of career path or occupation might make sense for you. I'm just remembering about this.
Yeah.
There's some value in that. Now, down the road, I'm like, there's value in that for real.
Yeah. You know what? Not just in high school. I think maybe it'd be better to also take those tests somewhere into your college life as well.
Just double check.
Double check, because
Yeah.
you're growing. You may seem like, hey, I like this. I like doing this.
Yeah.
But then the more you get introduced into the world and what's out there, you're like, wait a minute, maybe there's this, right? So maybe give yourself that recheck, like, hey, is this truly what I want to do? And just like with medical, right? I did EMT, and that EMT decision, while I was doing it in the field, I understood and kind of solidified that for me that, yeah, this isn't for me, right? So maybe get more out there, right? So if you're doing...
You could volunteer at a hospital or something. Yeah.
Yeah, get more out there early on.
Right.
So whether that would be with medicine, whether that would be with engineering, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Understand what that work is really like and see if you relate to it.
Sure.
Because again, like I said, with textbooks, it's one thing, and then you get out there in the real world, you're like, that is not what I was ready for. So I would suggest, and yes, it is hard, but there's ways to volunteer. There are conferences that you can attend and meet folks. And these conferences are vertical wide, right? So it's not just warehousing and supply chain. It could be, oil and gas. It could be anything, any vertical you pick. They have conferences. Attend those, network with people, try to gauge where, their experiences led them, and understand what that real world is really like and see if you relate to it.
Right. My personal story is I was done with my first 2 years of college at a junior college, majoring in business administration and not knowing what I was going to do next, right? I'm a business major. That's all I know. And so I was getting ready to transfer to a 4-year school, and I went and asked like the head of the business department, and I was like, what should I consider doing for my next 2 years? Because I think this business administration is not specific enough. And he's the one who said, go check out logistics. It's like this growing field. Right. And so it was that one conversation. Right. And if you look back at it now, it's like I've done since that conversation for the next almost 20 years, that has been my occupation and my passion and where I pay my bills and I get my fulfillment from. Right. Exactly. All from that one conversation. Right. So, kind of shout out to teachers, right? Like they are the ones that set us on these paths that fulfill us for the rest of our careers and our lives. And so you're right. At that halfway point in my college career, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And it was just, I was thankful for that one voice that said, and it was the only voice I asked. It's the only answer I got. It's the only degree I actually thought about and went, and I was like, yeah, that sounds good. I'll do that. Yeah. Right. But it could have very much not gone well. Right. So it was, I just feel fortunate that I was able to have been pointed in the right direction and it been a good personality and sort of mind, fit. But yeah, not everyone is fortunate in that way. Right.
Right.
You talked a little about labor being an issue and maybe robots being an ability to kind of hedge some of that labor pain and heartburn. Are there any sort of other main topics in that space that you're kind of picking up on, or trends around what the problem is that's keeping people from pulling the trigger and what, kind of solutions for that or ways to get around those obstacles? A
lot of folks also talk about, so there's a couple of things that I keep hearing. Is some people believe that once you automate, you automate. That means, hey, everything changes. The structure we know it is no longer going to be the same. Robots are going to come in and everything's going to be different. And that's not the case. You can start small. You don't need to go in and have everything automated, right? Start small and see, hey, yes, I feel comfortable with this. My employees feel comfortable with this. And then next phase, right?
Gotcha.
So I've seen some people talk about phases, and that seems to also work for them. There's a few folks that I've talked to that have automated, and they rolled it out in phases. And it was an easier transition. Instead of their employees feeling like, oh, there goes our job, right? They felt more like, oh, cool, new technology, we get to learn more. Oh, another cool technology, we get to learn more, rather than, I'm going to get fired today. So I think that also helped with the employee and like work culture as well.
Mm-hmm. You can do it in little baby steps.
Baby steps, right?
Yeah.
So think of it about automating in baby steps rather than the whole. And that may help with the transition of bringing automation into the space. Another thing that I keep hearing is people saying, hey, maybe the ROI won't work. I don't know. I need to look into that. I don't know if the investment makes sense for me. Right. So with that, what we like to do over at Rapyuta is we have an ROI program. What we do early on is, let's say if somebody is interested into automating their warehouse, we like to go in, do a site visit. This is completely at no cost to our customers. And so we go in, we do a site visit, we take a look at what operations you have, see if even if it's a fit for our robot. We come back with that data. We run it through a simulation. The simulation that we do in-house actually provides us with information that, hey, according to your warehouse space, for example, the size, the stuff that you're picking, you'll need about X amount of robots. Right. From that, you're looking at an ROI break even by month X. Mm-hmm. So we like to provide all of that way early on. Yeah. That way it's an easier conversation and they know what they're getting themselves into, right? So rather than them feeling like, hey, rather than the end customers feeling like, oh, hey, this is a lot, it's more of, okay, hey, according to my data, this automation makes sense and my ROI will be back in X months, right? So it's good and it's better understanding once that is done and they feel more confident. What we've noticed is they said, yeah, okay, this makes sense. We want to move forward. We want to try this. So then we have those robots roll out. And another concern that we also see and hear about, which I feel fortunate that Rapyuta is able to provide these services, right, is some people also feel that, hey, once these robots are deployed, is it just hands off? We have to figure this out on our own. It's not the case. We actually have our engineer, for example, is on site for a month. We want to make sure that everything is running smoothly as possible. We like to have calls with our customers. We like to do some visits just to make sure everything's running smoothly. And we want to make sure that, hey, you're still on your goal to meet your ROI. So we'll run that simulation again, just to make sure that they're still on track. Okay. If something changes, because inventory changes all the time, right? So we want to make sure that, hey, according to your new inventory, stuff went up or that amount went up. You're looking at now, maybe adding a robot to still meet that goal. Or hey, no, you're doing fine. You're still on your trajectory to meet your ROI. And yeah, so we like to do those things way early on and afterwards too to support our customers as well.
Okay, maybe one last thing here. You talked a little bit about ROI type of stuff, but if I recall looking at your website, you have like a robots as a service type of platform, which maybe operates in a more subscription type of way.
Yes.
Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yeah. So we do more of a robot as a service. Our robots currently run on a RAS model. Okay. And we have a regular size and an XL model as well. So depending on how, again, this goes back to your data, that ROI makes sense depending on how many pickers, for example, you have and what the stuff you're picking, the output as well. Once we gather all of that, we know, hey, this is the ROI. We can do a RAS model, but if somebody's looking into buying these robots outright, it's also something we can talk about too. And all of our products do come with our own software, which is the Rapyuta IO platform.
Okay. Here in the last minute, if someone fast forwarded through this entire episode because they were just really want to get to the last 1 minute, what's the one thing you would want to leave them with? Make sure they kind of take away from this conversation.
I would say don't be so afraid of automating. Robots aren't as scary as they seem. And so if you're looking into it and you're looking into trying the automation space, I know for us, we also do demos as well. Try that out and see if that works for you and see if demos is something, if you truly see, hey, if I see these robots running in my warehouse, this is what it would look like. And it would actually help, right? So fast forward, don't be afraid of automation. Try it, see if it is for you. And looking at different automation, if you're looking at different warehouses, not all warehouses are the same. So what fits for somebody else may not fit for you. So definitely, have that consultation beforehand and understand, hey, these are the robots we're needing, not wanting but needing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So some people will be like, hey, well, I want this, but it's like, okay, but do you need it?
Yeah.
And so something that, we also are able to help with that, hey, according to your warehouse, this is what you're looking at needing, right? So try that out, see if maybe that works best for you. Last thing I want to leave students with is network. Get out of that classroom zone and see what's truly out there. Try to get as much as real world experience as you can. And decide. It's a scary jump, but once you do make that jump and you realize, oh, thank God I did, and I would have been there, it's better. Things are better on the other side.
You'll be stronger for it.
Exactly. So that's what I would leave with.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you around.
Thank you.